The morning sky over the Virginia Joint Operations Base looked unusually heavy, as if even the clouds were holding their breath. A thin layer of mist clung to the ground, rolling slowly across the concrete paths where military boots struck in perfect rhythm. Helicopters thudded in the distance. Radios crackled. Commands were barked in sharp, practiced tones. Everything looked normal. But it was, because today wasn't just another training day. Today, something classified had been scheduled under a name that didn't appear in any public briefing document. A joint evaluation exercise. No one fully understood what that meant. And no one had been told who was coming. The gate that changed everything. At exactly 08:57 a.m., the main gate guards straightened their posture. Not because of routine inspection, but because of notification. A black SUV approached. No markings, no escort convoy, no visible security detail. Just silence. The vehicle stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the rear door opened. A woman stepped out. She didn't rush. She didn't pause to observe. She didn't look impressed or nervous or curious. She simply moved forward like the base already belonged to her. Wearing a perfectly pressed U.S. Army uniform, she walked with controlled calm. No exaggerated authority, no visible arrogance. But something about her presence made the guards instinctively adjust their posture without knowing why. Her name tag read, Capt. Elena Walker. That was all. No extra titles, no unit displayed. Just a name. And yet the air around her felt different. One of the gate soldiers whispered under his breath, "Did she come alone to a SEAL facility?" The other replied quietly, "I think we're not supposed to ask that." The base that did react at first. Inside the base, the usual morning rhythm continued. Soldiers running drills, officers reviewing screens, instructors shouting corrections, the smell of metal, sweat, and fuel mixing into the air. But as Elena Walker passed through the main corridor, conversation started fading. Not because she demanded attention, but because attention refused to stay elsewhere. A pair of Marines stopped mid-step. 2 Air Force personnel lowered their voices. Even a senior officer glanced at her twice, then quickly looked away as if he wasn't supposed to notice. One soldier muttered, "Who is she supposed to be?" Another answered, "No idea, but she's not regular staff." Elena didn't react to any of it. She just kept walking. Her boots made no loud sound. Not because they were soft, but because she placed each step with precise control, like she already knew exactly where she would land before she moved. The SEAL yard where confidence lives. At the far end of the base, the training yard was already alive with energy. This was where elite Navy SEAL units prepared. A place where ego wasn't just present, it was sharpened daily. 10 SEAL operators stood in a loose formation near the combat mat. Laughing, joking, throwing light punches at each other. Their confidence was not fake. It was earned through years of missions most people would never hear about. One of them, tall and heavily built, rolled his shoulders and said, "Another evaluation day. Bet it's some officer here to take notes and leave." Another SEAL smirked. "Or someone's daughter trying to play soldier." Laughter followed. Not cruel, just dismissive. Because in their world, respect had to be earned under pressure. And outsiders rarely lasted long enough to earn it. Then someone noticed movement at the edge of the yard. A figure approaching. A woman. Walking alone. One SEAL squinted. "Is that her?" Another chuckled. "Yeah, that's definitely not a combat specialist." The team leader didn't even turn fully. Just said casually, She looks like she's here for paperwork, not war. More laughter. But then, she entered the yard, and something shifted. Not visibly, not loudly, but deeply, like the atmosphere itself tightened. For the first mistake, underestimating silence. Alina Walker stopped near the edge of the combat mat. She didn't announce herself, didn't salute anyone, didn't ask for permission. She simply observed. Not the people, not the weapons, not the structure, but everything at once, like she was reading the entire environment in layers. One SEAL leaned toward another and said, "She hasn't even looked at us yet." Another replied, "Yeah, maybe she's lost." The team leader finally stepped forward. He was experienced, confident, used to being the strongest person in any room. He called out, "You the evaluator." Alina turned slightly. Not fully, just enough for eye contact. Yes. One word. No emotion attached. That simplicity annoyed him more than arrogance would have. He crossed his arms. "You always this quiet, or is this your first time on a real base?" A few SEALs smirked again. Alina didn't respond immediately. Then she said, "Noise is unnecessary when observation is enough." That sentence didn't sound threatening, but it landed strangely, like a warning disguised as calm. 5. The crowd begins to form. By now, more soldiers had noticed. A small crowd started forming around the training yard perimeter. Whispers spread. Who is she? Why is she here alone? Is she even combat trained? Phones were not supposed to be out, but a few were. Not for disrespect, but because something about this moment felt like it might become important. The base commander arrived shortly after. He didn't look surprised, which immediately made others more curious. He stepped forward and said, "Stand by for evaluation protocol." That confirmed it. She wasn't a visitor. She was part of the system. Somewhere in the chain of command, this had been approved. But still, nobody understood why her. 6. The challenge begins before the fight. The SEAL team leader rolled his neck. He looked at Alina again. "You here to evaluate us?" "Yes," she replied. He smirked. "Good, then you won't mind a demonstration." The air changed instantly. A demonstration meant one thing. Someone was about to test her. He stepped onto the combat mat. The sand shifted under his boots. He gestured toward her. "Let's make it simple. If you can last 30 seconds against me, I'll personally admit I underestimated you." The crowd reacted immediately. Some SEALs laughed. Others just watched quietly. Because experienced fighters know, confidence often hides insecurity. Alina walked forward slowly. No rush. No hesitation. She removed her gloves carefully and placed them on the side bench. That small action made several people stop talking. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was controlled. Deliberate. Like she had done this exact moment before. The commander raised his hand. "Begin when ready." 7. The first clash that did happen yet. The SEAL shifted his stance. Loose. Ready. Explosive. He studied her for half a second, then smiled. "You ready?" Alina replied, "I already am." That was the last calm moment, because the SEAL moved instantly after that. Vast. Sharp. Closing distance aggressively. A trained strike designed to overwhelm most opponents in under 2 seconds. But Alina didn't step back. She stepped forward. That single movement confused him. Not physically, mentally. because it broke expectation. And in combat, expectation is everything. 8. The atmosphere breaks. The SEAL's fist came forward, and just as the moment of impact was about to happen, everything slowed. Not literally, but perceptually, for everyone watching. Because what came next wasn't a fight. It was the beginning of something no one in that yard understood yet. Alina's eyes didn't change. Her expression didn't shift. But her body moved with absolute certainty. Not defensive, not aggressive, just precise. And in that precision, the SEAL's confidence began to crack for the first time. End of part 1. If you want, I will continue with backhand index pointing right. Part 2, 2,500 plus words. The first strike that changed everything. It will include full combat escalation, SEAL realization moment, crowd reaction buildup, first domination shift, strong cliffhanger before the 11-second takedown. The air in the training yard had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. Because the moment Captain Alina Walker stepped closer to the combat mat, something shifted in the mindset of every person watching. This was no longer a casual evaluation. This was no longer a joke between elite soldiers. This was becoming something else. Something nobody had planned for. 1. The moment before impact feels heavier than impact itself. The Navy SEAL team leader rolled his shoulders once more. He wasn't nervous. Not yet. But something in his instincts had started whispering that this situation was different. And SEAL instincts, when trained long enough, are rarely wrong. He stared at Alina Walker. She wasn't moving like a challenger. She wasn't reacting like a guest. She was standing like someone who had already seen the outcome. That bothered him more than any threat could. He stepped forward onto the mat fully now. The sand shifted under his boots with a soft crunch. He loosened his neck. Then his fists. A small smirk returned to his face, almost as if he was trying to convince himself this was still simple. "Let's make this quick," he said. A few SEALs around him chuckled. One of them whispered, "She's about to get a reality check." Another replied, "10 seconds max." But Alina didn't respond. She just looked at him. Not at his face. Not at his body. But at his balance. Like she was reading him instead of meeting him. 2. The crowd stops breathing without realizing it. Around the yard, the crowd had grown. Soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder. Even instructors had stopped talking. A captain from logistics leaned toward another officer and whispered, "Is this sanctioned?" The officer replied quietly, "It's approved, but I don't think anyone expected this tone." Because it wasn't supposed to feel like a confrontation. It was supposed to be a demonstration. But demonstrations don't usually make people nervous. This did. Phones were still, but no one was watching screens anymore. Everyone was watching her. 3. The first movement is always a lie. The SEAL team leader shifted his weight slightly. That was the signal. The beginning. Fast fighters don't announce attacks with words. They do it with body language. He moved forward. Explosive. Direct. A straight engagement designed to overwhelm within seconds. His first strike came in hard. A clean train motion. Efficient. But Alina didn't react the way most people would. She didn't retreat. She didn't block immediately. She stepped in. That was the first mistake the SEAL's brain registered. Not physical. Psychological. Because most opponents create distance when danger approaches. She erased it. Instantly. 4. The first strike that never lands. His fist cut through the air toward her. But Alina's head tilted just slightly. Not enough to look dramatic. Just enough to make the strike miss by centimeters. The seal adjusted instantly. Second strike followed. Faster. Sharper. More controlled. Blocked. Not with force. With alignment. Her forearm redirected the motion, just enough to lose its power. The crowd reacted with a small shift. No cheers. No noise. Just silence tightening. Because now they were seeing something they didn't expect. She wasn't reacting. She was managing. 5. Confidence begins to leak. The seal frowned. He reset his stance. "You're trained," he said under his breath. Alina replied calmly. "Yes." That single word felt heavier than anything else so far. Because it wasn't pride. It wasn't challenge. It was confirmation. Like she was acknowledging something obvious. The seal tightened his grip. "Let's see how far that training goes." He moved again. This time faster. Harder. A combination sequence designed to break defense patterns. Left strike. Right hook. Step-in pressure. Upper body shift. A clean sequence most opponents struggle to read. But Alina wasn't reacting late. She was reacting early. Too early. 6. The crowd starts noticing something wrong. A junior soldier whispered. "Why does it look like she knows what he's doing before he does it?" Another replied. "That's not possible, right?" But doubt was already forming. Because what they were seeing wasn't defense. It was prediction. Alina wasn't reacting to movement. She was reacting to intention. And that changes everything in combat. 7. The first real contact that changes everything. The seal lunged forward again. This time committing fully. No hesitation. No testing. A full-force engagement. He aimed to break her posture, force her backward, dominate space. His hand reached toward her shoulder. And for the first time, he made contact. But not the kind he expected. Alina's hand met his wrist mid-motion. Not grabbing. Not striking. Guiding. A subtle redirection. His momentum didn't stop. It changed direction. Slightly. Enough. His balance shifted forward unexpectedly. Just a fraction off-center. But in combat, fractions are fatal. 8. The first crack in control. The seal's foot adjusted quickly. Too quickly. He tried to recover his stance. But Alina was already closer. Too close. Inside his reaction range. Inside his comfort zone. Inside his control window. And that is where trained fighters become vulnerable. Because they are no longer executing planned movement. They are reacting. He attempted to disengage. But his arm was already compromised in position. Not locked. Not restrained. Just controlled enough to guide his next movement. And that terrified him more than force would have. 9. The crowd feels the shift without understanding it. One instructor muttered, "He's not dictating pace anymore." Another responded, "She is." A senior officer narrowed his eyes. That shouldn't be happening. But it was happening. Because now the fight wasn't about strength. It was about structure. And Alina's structure was already inside his. 10. The seal realizes something he didn't want to accept. For the first time, his breathing changed. Not from exhaustion. From realization. This wasn't a sparring mismatch. This wasn't ego. This wasn't even competition. It was containment. He was being contained. Every movement he tried to initiate was already being accounted for. Not blocked, not stopped, redirected. The difference is critical. Blocking resists, redirecting controls. And control means the outcome is already decided. 11. The crowd holds its breath. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed quieter. Because something was building toward a moment no one could name yet. The seal tried one more aggressive entry. A final attempt to reset dominance. He stepped in fast. But Alina moved with him. Not away. With him. Matching distance. Matching timing. Breaking rhythm. And that's when everything began to collapse toward the inevitable moment. The moment that would become the legend of the base. The moment had finally arrived, but nobody in the training yard understood it yet. The air felt tighter now. Heavier. Like the world itself was holding still, waiting for something it already knew was inevitable. Captain Alina Walker stood in the combat space with absolute calm. Across from her, the Navy SEAL team leader adjusted his stance again, but something subtle had changed in him. It wasn't confidence anymore. It was urgency. Because confidence assumes control. And control was already slipping. 1. The shift from fighting to surviving. The SEAL rolled his shoulders once. Then twice. A habit. A reset mechanism trained into elite operators. But resets are only useful when the system is still stable. And right now, his internal system wasn't stable anymore. He looked at Alina. She wasn't moving aggressively. She wasn't preparing like someone about to attack. She was simply ready. And that was worse. Because readiness without tension means one thing. The outcome is already decided in your opponent's mind. He stepped forward. "This ends now," he said under his breath. Alina didn't respond. Not because she ignored him, but because she didn't need to. 2. The first true commitment. He moved. This time no testing. No probing. Full commitment. A clean, explosive entry designed to overwhelm her structure immediately. His footwork was sharp. His timing precise. His upper body rotated into the strike sequence like a machine built for efficiency. First strike. Vast. Second. Faster. Third. Closing distance aggressively. The SEAL wasn't just fighting now. He was trying to reclaim dominance. But Alina didn't react like an opponent. She reacted like a system. 3. The first second distance disappears. The strike came in. And Alina shifted. Not backward. Not away. Into the gap. That single movement disrupted the SEAL's rhythm instantly. Because fighters expect resistance. They expect retreat. They expect collision or avoidance. But they don't expect entry into their own attack line. His fist passed just beside her shoulder. A near miss. But near misses don't matter when the structure is already compromised. Alina's hand touched his wrist. Not grabbing. Guiding. A subtle redirection that changed the angle of force. The SEAL felt it immediately. Something was wrong. 4. The second, balance begins to fail. He tried to recover. Pivot. Reset. Re-engage. But his center of gravity had already shifted slightly forward. Not dramatically. Not visibly. But enough. And in elite combat, enough is everything. Alina stepped again. Small movement. Precise placement. She was now inside his optimal striking range, but also inside his worst control range. That paradox hit him mentally. He wasn't sure how to respond. And hesitation in elite combat is not a pause. It is a fracture. 5. The third second, the crowd notices the pattern. A soldier at the edge whispered, "He can't land clean anymore." Another responded, "She's always there before he finishes moving." An instructor narrowed his eyes. "That's timing control." Another replied, "No, that's prediction." But neither word fully captured it. Because what Alina was doing wasn't reacting or predicting. She was leading the sequence without announcing it. 6. The fourth second, pressure without force. The SEAL attempted a forceful disengagement. Pull back. Reset distance. Rebuild attack angle. But Alina followed, not aggressively but precisely. Every step he took backward was matched. Every attempt to break rhythm was absorbed. Not blocked. Neutralized. The SEAL's breathing changed slightly. Shorter now. He was starting to realize something uncomfortable. He wasn't setting pace anymore. He was following one. 7. The fifth second, the first visible panic signal. A subtle shift in his posture. Shoulders tightening. Eyes narrowing. Micro-adjustments increasing. Elite fighters don't panic loudly. They adjust. Over-adjust. That is the first visible crack. He tried a sudden strike from an unexpected angle. A sharp hook designed to break her alignment. But Alina's head moved just enough. Millimeters. Not dramatic. Not reactive. Efficient. The strike passed harmlessly again. And for the first time, the SEAL missed with intention, not error. That difference matters, because intentional misses mean loss of control. 8. The sixth second, control becomes illusion. Alina's hand connected again. Wrist alignment. Not forceful. Structural. The SEAL felt his arm guided, not restrained, not locked, but redirected. His posture tilted slightly. Not enough to fall, but enough to destabilize future movement. That is where elite fighters begin to lose fights without realizing it. Because they are still standing, but no longer balanced. 9. The seventh second, the crowd goes silent. No laughter now. No whispers. Just silence. Heavy silence. Even the SEAL's teammates were no longer smiling. One of them muttered, "This isn't going how it should." Another didn't respond, because they could see it too. The leader wasn't losing visibly. He was losing structurally. And structure is invisible until it collapses. 10. The eighth second, the attempted reset fails. The SEAL tried to break contact. Step back. Reset stance. Re-engage distance. But Alina followed again. Always at the edge of his control range. Never too close to panic. Never too far to escape. Perfect spacing. It was like she was measuring him in real time and correcting him continuously. That realization hit him internally. Hard, because now he understood. He wasn't fighting a person. He was inside a system. 11. The ninth second, the first true desperation. He pushed forward again. A stronger attack. More aggressive. Less technical. More instinctive. That is what happens when training starts to collapse under pressure. But Alina didn't speed up. She didn't escalate. She simplified. One step. One adjustment. One redirection. And suddenly, his attack no longer had direction. Only motion. And motion without direction is already defeat forming. 12. The 10th second, the breaking point. The SEAL felt it clearly now. This wasn't a match. This wasn't sparring. This wasn't evaluation. It was containment. Every action he initiated was already accounted for. Every movement he attempted was already inside her structure. He was no longer operating freely. He was being guided toward failure. And for the first time, his eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but in realization. He understood what was about to happen, but understanding it didn't stop it. 13, the 11th second, the fall. Alina shifted. Not fast, not dramatic, just final. A precise adjustment of position and leverage. The seal's balance, already compromised through 10 seconds of structural control, finally reached its limit. His body moved forward, but there was no foundation left to support it. A clean redirection. A controlled takedown. No brutality. No excess force. Just perfect timing applied at the exact moment control collapsed completely. And the seal hit the mat. 14. Silence after impact. No sound followed immediately. No reaction. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that only happens when the brain is still processing what the eyes have already accepted. The seal stayed down for a moment. Not injured. Not unconscious. Just stunned. Because in 11 seconds, everything he trusted in, training, speed, experience, dominance, had been dismantled without violence. 15. Alina Walker stands still. She stepped back. Calm. Neutral. Unchanged. Like nothing had happened. Because to her, it hadn't. The crowd didn't move. No one spoke. And in that silence, something shifted in the base forever. The training yard didn't move. Not immediately. Not even after the seal hit the mat. It was as if reality itself needed a moment to catch up with what had just happened. Because what they saw wasn't just a takedown. It was a complete dismantling of expectation, of hierarchy, of assumption, and of ego. Captain Alina Walker stood where she had always stood, calm, steady, unreadable. Like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. 1. The silence that feels loud. For almost 5 full seconds, nobody spoke. Not the soldiers. Not the instructors. Not even the SEAL teammates. Only the sound of distant helicopters and wind moving across the base filled the space. The SEAL on the ground slowly pushed himself up onto one elbow. He didn't look angry. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked confused. Because elite fighters don't lose quickly. And when they do, their minds struggle to accept it. He glanced at Alina. Then away. Then back again. Like he was trying to find the moment where things went wrong. But there was no single moment. And that was the problem. 2. The commander breaks the silence. The base commander finally stepped forward. His boots struck the ground with purpose. Enough. One word. Sharp. Controlled. Instantly, the tension shifted from shock to discipline. Soldiers straightened. The SEAL team regrouped instinctively. But no one relaxed. Because the question had not been answered yet. And questions like this don't disappear on their own. The commander looked at the SEAL first. Then at Alina. Then at the entire yard. This evaluation is complete. A pause. But that wasn't the explanation. That was just the transition. 3. The question everyone is afraid to ask. A young officer finally spoke, unable to hold it in anymore. Sir, who exactly is she? The commander didn't answer immediately. That hesitation was enough to increase tension further. Because in military environments, hesitation usually means classification. Finally, he spoke. Captain Alina Walker, is not part of a standard assignment structure. The crowd stayed silent. He continued. She is attached to a joint operational evaluation program that operates under multiple cleared branches. A SEAL operator muttered quietly. That doesn't explain what just happened. The commander nodded slightly. You're right. He looked at Alina now. And it also doesn't explain her. 4. The SEAL gets back on his feet. The SEAL team leader stood fully now. Slowly, carefully, not like someone defeated, but like someone recalibrating reality. He rolled his shoulder once, then looked at Alina. No hostility, no ego, just understanding slowly forming through resistance. I didn't see that coming, he admitted quietly. Alina replied without emotion. That was the problem. That line landed heavier than the takedown. Because it wasn't insulting. It was diagnostic. 5. The commander finally reveals the edge of truth. The commander took a breath, then spoke in a lower, more controlled tone. There are training profiles that are not part of active duty rotations. He paused. Some are built for adaptation under uncertainty. Another pause. And some are built to operate inside systems that assume they already understand combat. The SEAL frowned slightly. What does that mean? The commander looked at him directly. It means you train for opponents you can recognize. A silence followed. Then he added, she trains for opponents who think they are unrecognizable. That statement changed the atmosphere again. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was precise. 6. Alina Walker, still not explaining herself. Alina stood calmly as the entire yard focused on her. But she didn't react to the attention. She never had. A soldier whispered. She didn't even breathe harder during the fight. Another replied. Did she even fight? That question lingered. Because what they saw didn't feel like a fight anymore. It felt like a correction. 7. The SEAL's realization. The SEAL stepped slightly closer. Not aggressively. Carefully. Like approaching a concept rather than a person. I want to understand something, he said. Alina looked at him. For the first time directly. He continued. Was I predictable, or were you just faster? There was a pause. A real pause. Then Alina answered. Neither. That confused him. She continued. You were complete. He frowned. That doesn't make sense. Alina nodded slightly. It does. Another pause. Then she added. Completion creates structure. Structure can be mapped, and anything that can be mapped can be guided. That sentence changed everything. Because it implied something deeper than skill. It implied understanding of systems. 8. The yard begins to feel smaller. The crowd no longer felt like observers. They felt like participants in something they didn't understand. Even the most experienced officers were silent now, because they had all seen elite fighters lose before. But never like this. Never so clean. Never so controlled. Never so inevitable. One instructor finally whispered. This wasn't domination. Another responded quietly. This was design. 9. The SEAL accepts what he can't deny. The SEAL exhaled slowly. Then nodded. I misjudged you. Alina didn't respond immediately. Then, that is normal. Not insulting. Not emotional. Just factual. He smiled slightly, not out of humor but recognition. Yeah, he said quietly, it is. That moment mattered more than the fight. Because respect after defeat is harder than victory itself. 10. The commander closes the evaluation. The commander raised his hand. This concludes today's demonstration. But no one moved yet, because demonstrations are supposed to clarify, not deepen mystery. He looked at the team, returned to formation. They obeyed slowly, but their minds were still elsewhere, because something had changed in how they viewed capability. 11. Elena walks away. Elena turned. No ceremony. No acknowledgement. No pause. Just movement. A straight line toward the exit, like she had never needed the attention in the first place. Behind her, the yard remained silent, not out of respect, but out of recalibration, because everyone there understood something without saying it. They had just witnessed a level of control that didn't announce itself. 12. The final thought that stays behind. As she reached the edge of the yard, one soldier whispered, "Who is she really?" No one answered, because the truth wasn't something that could be explained in words. It was something that had to be experienced. And even then, understood only partially. Final moment. The wind moved again across the base. Normal operations resumed. But nothing felt normal anymore. Because somewhere inside every witness's mind, one fact remained permanently locked in. A Navy SEAL had lasted exactly 11 seconds. Not because he was weak, but because he finally met someone who didn't fight to win. She fought like losing was never part of the system.